let's have a quick look at our textbooks. The first one, I don't know, I've always found this totally fabulous. I used like the first edition when I was a child, but now, it's important, and it's just full of fabulous information. It's changed over the years. It now includes more on technology and on newer versions of teaching models and so on. But to my mind, it's never changed in its usefulness in terms of practical experience in the classroom. Okay, so it gives you a ton of exercises on how teaching reading, writing. It gives you a ton of information on, how to assess skills and so on. I mean, it really is, it's just a really fabulous little treasure trove of information for you. It gives you classroom practices on how to teach particular skills. I don't know how familiar you are with this. I started teaching in Europe, teaching EFL. So EFL is English as a foreign language, which in Europe, in England, meant all the little Spanish kids that came in to learn English, and little Italian kids or whatever came in for the summer, Egyptian kids all over, and then left and went home again. And ESL was immigrants, people from India, Africa, Arabia, who came in to actually live in England, and that was a completely different thing. Now in America, it's a different division, right? In America, EFL means people who are not learning English in America. So it means people who are learning English in Korea or China or whatever. And ESL means people who are learning English in America, right? So it's two different ideas. Those terms have always been different between Europe and America, so try not to get too confused about that. In Europe, when we taught EFL, which was all the little European kids coming in over summer, we taught English. There was no division between teaching speaking, listening, reading, or writing. We just taught English. To the point that when I arrived here in 1991 or whenever it was, my supervisor said, "What do you want to teach?" And I said, I thought, does she think I can teach Spanish? I was like, English? She said, yeah, I know you want to teach English. But what do you want to teach? Speaking, listening, reading, or writing? I had never heard of this before in my life. I had been teaching EFL in England and Europe for 5 years. I had no idea that in America they split it down the skills. Okay, so again, that's something that's very American. Those of you who are coming from other countries, I don't know how it worked. Did you have split skills? You did have split skills. Yeah. Did you have split skills, Nana? Yeah. So I think, I guess at this point I'm super old-fashioned as well, because I did it a long, long time ago. So I guess now, interestingly, most of the countries that do EFL are teaching using American materials, and American materials split down the middle. But that means that a book like Brown distinguishes between not just teaching English, but teaching reading, teaching writing, teaching speech, and so on. In addition, in England, EFL was essentially all the little kids that came in from Europe. In this country, you have a big division between K through 12 instruction, which is run out of the education department in universities, and adult and foreign language instruction. So even though Brown does talk a little bit about different age levels, our focus is not on K through 12. There is a TESOL certification run through the Education College that deals with K through 12. Okay, our focus is on adults and EFL, teaching in foreign environments. We're going to go through most of these chapters because I hate asking you to buy a book and then not doing that, but we won't go through all of them. I recommend that you look at the others when you get a chance. This week you're going to start with chapter 1, and it starts with a sort of lesson observation. It says, here we go, we're in a EFL class in Korea. Let's do an observation of this class and see what happens in this very typical EFL class. So I hope you enjoy that. The other book is Larson, Freeman and Anderson. Diane Larson Freeman, some of you may have heard of. She's a super, super famous grammar person. She's been doing grammar for a very, very, very long time, and is a very famous person in our field. And I have no idea who this guy is. But anyway. So what she does is give you an outline of all the different methodologies that have been used, I guess, from the mid-20th century through now. And why is that interesting? Because two reasons. It gives you a sense of the history of the field, right? What is TESOL? How long has it been going on? What have people done? Why did they do it that way? And the second reason is that TESOL is now a bit of a hodgepodge of all of those things. Okay, so you can go to some programs and they will use textbooks from the 1970s or 80s by someone like Krashen, and then you will go to other programs and they will have moved on from Krashen and be using textbooks from the 2000s, which don't have the same theoretical background and believe in different theoretical premises, thus the books are different. You will also find, depending upon often the money and the resources that schools have, you know, books, pronunciation books from the 1960s that say, if you want to learn pronunciation, you need to do what's called minimal pairs. So they have pages and pages of ship or sheep, like ship or sheep, tip or tap. Think of any more. Hop and cap. Say that again. Hop. 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 Cop? Yeah, okay, sorry. Cop and cap, absolutely. Hop and hat. Oh, no. Hop and hop. You know, so pages and pages of these things. Why? Because in the 1950s, during structuralism, we believed, or they believed, actually wasn't around teaching then, they believed that language was a habit formation exercise. So if you wanted to learn language properly, you had to keep repeating and repeating and repeating the same sounds, and you had to do them exactly correct. So the way to do that was have you go through hundreds of minimal pairs until you could clearly say hot and hop, or, you know, hat and that. Anything these where you only have one sound that's different. They also had, like, you know, long legs Larry left the large loom, or you know, I mean, they have these long kind of things where you have to go through and all you do is repeat. So you still find all those books. I still have a library with some of those. You still find people that are using those. We'll talk about the differences in approach and how we feel about what's changed and what might be helpful as we go through. But the Larson, Freeman, and Anderson, that's its job. Its job is to say to you, here are the methods that have been used in the last, basically since the mid-20th century, to teach T-cell. Okay? So, for example, we begin in the Diane Larson Freeman with the oldest method in the book, which is grammar translation, right? Which is how they taught Latin and Greek. You know, you literally, you're not supposed to speak it, you just start copying down grammar and you use the literary canon to do that. So that's what that book does. And in my view, it's super important that you, when you come to the field at this point, you understand where the field has come from. Because then you can decide what part of what it's come from you're interested in and what part of it you'd rather abandon because you think it's garbage, okay? So what, it's also true that, as Diane Larson Freeman says, depending upon where you are in the world, these methods are still ongoing, okay? So you will see, for example, on the grammar translation, a lesson in Vietnam where they are still using grammar translation, even though in this country, you would never use grammar translation to or rarely use grammar translation to teach EFL. So, so that's why we're looking at that. So you've got both of those things, and what we do is I try and coordinate one and the other. Okay, so if, for example, we have the direct method, which is basically teaching speaking, we would try and focus on speaking skills and so on. So I'm trying to sort of, where I can, match those, but that's why you're doing simultaneous chapters from both. In addition, each week, there's a short video that we'll watch of a teacher teaching that method that Larson Freeman. And today we start with a short introductory video that Larson Freeman does. What I'm going to do for everybody online is, before we watch that video, I'm going to tell you that we're about to watch that video and how long that video will be, so that you are able to either watch it while we watch it, or if it's easier for you and probably nicer for you to link into the link yourself, you can fast forward through that part and watch the link yourself on your own computer. Okay. Okay, in addition, we're going to be doing some additional reading only when I feel that it's super beneficial for you. This book I just got, and it's a fabulous book. It's called T-Cell, A Guide. It's by Jun Liu and Cynthia Berger. Jun Liu was president of T-Cell at one time. And it really is just trying to give you an idea of what this field is about, okay? So your first extra reading is Introduction, What is T-Cell? It's a PDF of the first chapter from this book. It's a fabulous overview of the T-Cell, the institution, the field, the stuff that you guys are doing right now. I strongly recommend. It's 36 pages. It's not a, but it's, if you're coming into T-Cell as a profession, it's 36 pages of fabulousness that you will enjoy, okay? So where those come up, we say that you'll also be doing that as extra reading, and that will be supplied in DocShare for you. All right. Any questions? thus far? Everybody happy? Questions, comments, issues? Yay!
What about some of those of us that don't have any experience teaching or don't necessarily plan to be full-time teachers? And,
What is it you plan to do, Diego?
my goal is to learn about TESOL and about the different strategies that have been used to teach it and why, in my opinion, it has not always been successful.
Uh-huh. Good. So you're saying that your primary interest is really in how second language acquisition is taught, maybe, and like why it doesn't seem to go super well. Right. Okay. So I mean, I think one thing that's super useful for you is to see this history of methods. So for example, if we start with something like grammar translation, you can look at how grammar translation is taught. You can look at this video, for instance, where you see the students working in Vietnam, and you can start working out yourself, why does that look to you like it's not super successful? Yeah, because the truth is it isn't super successful. There's a ton of cons when it comes to grammar translation, even though it's still used in many places around the world. So that will give you an idea of your own sort of principled basis for what you believe for second language acquisition. The second thing I would say is it's super hard to do anything in applied linguistics and not end up teaching TESOL. I don't know if anybody else agrees with me, but you almost always end up at some point doing some form of, even if that is teaching writing and having ESL learners in your classroom. If, for example, you decide to do a PhD, which we hope that you might, you know, the way that you do that is become an assistant, and as soon as you become an assistant, you're going to end up teaching TESOL in one form or another.
And I do have an interest too.
Yeah.
Was, you know,
So,
it's not my priority.
Yeah. So, no, it's certainly, you know, so from both of those perspectives, you just need to think about it in terms of, okay, I look at the principles of this method. I look at this method in action. You will also at some point do with me a second language acquisition class, and essentially they kind of blend together in the idea of, well, in what ways do the principles of this TESOL method match the principles of what we know about second language acquisition? So, for example, using again the grammar translation method, more and more in second language acquisition, people have been saying that motivation, individual motivation, is crucial. That this may be sort of one of the principal dividing factors between being okay, being intermediate, and becoming a post-advanced, you know, learner, someone who can do, you know, a great deal in the language. And so then you can sort of look back and look at method and say, well, what methods, teaching methods might promote that kind of motivation and what might suppress it? You know, so one thing that's been said, and one of the cons we'll look at with grammar translation, is that because you get no chance to actually work with the language, you know, no one's interested in hearing you saying it. You know, we don't want to, or if you do say it, you only say one word at a time or something, one sentence at a time. That sort of suppresses personal motivation for even wanting to learn a language in the first place. Like, why, you know, if you just want to translate from one language to another, that's different from becoming a post-advanced learner. So if you're saying that personal motivation is potentially a super important aspect of high success at SLA, then you want to look at the language method that you're using and say, does that promote that? Or does that sort of crush that like a stone? in which case, is it likely to be less successful? So that's the way that you want to look at it, Diego, and I think you'll find that very useful. Yeah. Good question. Anybody else? In that case, we're going to watch Diane Larson Freeman talk to you about how happy she is that you bought her book and all the fabulous things you're going to learn from her book. So it's actually good. You guys should see it just to find out who she is. Those of you that go to conferences, she's at all the conferences. And like I say, she's one of the top people in our field. All right, so let's have a little look. It's a 5-minute video, which hopefully is going to work.
Thank you for your interest in this book. Hello, everyone. My name is Diane Larson Freeman. I'm the author of Techniques and Principles in Language Teaching, published by Oxford University Press. Thank you for your interest in this book. It's given me an opportunity to create a 3rd edition. In fact, I should have said I'm a co-author, because for this edition, I invited Dr. Marty Anderson to join me. Dr. Anderson and I have been long-term colleagues, teaching at the School for International Training in Brattleboro, Vermont. There, we co-taught a course in language teaching methods, because we believed that language teaching methods was an essential part of language teacher education. After all, studying language teaching methods can help us clarify our own beliefs about language learning, language teaching, and language. They can also give us a wide repertoire of new activities with which to experiment. And they can challenge our existing thinking. There are many more reasons for studying language teaching methods. You can read about those in the chapter we've posted on this website. But for now, let me explore that 3rd one, challenging us to think in new ways. Last November, I was preparing to teach and to speak in Mexico at the MEX-TESOL convention. As I was thinking about what I was going to say, I came to a new awareness about language teaching methods, that they help us to understand language learners as whole people, and that this has come about through an evolution of language teaching methods. After all, in the past century, the middle of the past century, the audiolingual method was dominant. According to that method, it was the learner's role to passively respond to the teacher by imitating the teacher and responding to his or her drills. It wasn't long after that the cognitive revolution took place, and with it, a new interpretation of the learner's role. The learner wasn't just repeating, the learner was, in fact, hypothesizing about the language and testing the hypotheses out as he or she produced the language. The learner was a cognitive being. The silent way is a good example of giving that role importance. Later, still, affect or feelings were considered important. Suggestipedia, community language learning, total physical response are all methods that suggest we have to deal with the affect of the learners in order to take them away from the defensive posture that impedes their learning. Following that, the field took what's called a social turn. The communicative approach came along, and with it, the understanding that we learn a lot of language as we use it. We learn to communicate by communicating. Indeed, we are social beings as well. Of course, the work of Paulo Freire in Brazil and others has made us aware of ourselves and our students as political beings. Knowing another language empowers one in a way that not knowing it does not. With work on language learning strategies, learning styles, content-based, task-based approaches, all of these has made us think not only that we're teaching language, but we're teaching learners as well, and learning, and content through language learning. All of these have redefined the learners and our own roles as well as teachers. Perhaps the last stage, at least up to now, in the evolution of language teaching has come about in part due to the new technologies. Instead of being a host of someone else's language, we can see the language learner as being an owner and indeed an innovator of the language, much more autonomous and creative act, leading to new language and not just rehearsal of old language. I think at this point in the evolution of the field, we can say that the study of methods has added to our understanding of many roles, expanding number of roles, from imitator to cognitive being, to affective being, to social being, to political being, to creator. Indeed, a whole person. Thank you for watching. I hope your reading of this book leads you to your own awarenesses about language teaching. And I hope, too, that you use these methods to good avail in your teaching. Happy reading, happy learning, happy teaching.
Isn't she just adorable? Mm-hmm. So that's Diane Larson Freeman. That's International House. Has anyone heard of International House? Teaching in London? I wouldn't teach for them because they had video cameras in the classroom, much like this one. So you had to, you never knew when you were being watched. And they had this whole set of rules that you had to follow. So if you didn't follow the right rule, you were being watched. So I was like, yeah, no thanks. Now, that's different from having an open classroom. When I was in Florida, we had a teaching classroom, so a teaching lab classroom, in which it would be like this, only that back wall was all mirrors, was all two-way mirror. So anybody could be sitting behind there. Could be undergraduate students who've been brought in by their professor. It could be professors, it could be anyone. You had no idea who was there. But they weren't there to check off their checklist of whether you said the right thing or didn't say the right thing. It was more about having a lab classroom. Like, how is it that we teach ESL, EFL in University of Florida and everyone? And I'm a huge believer in that. It's called an open door classroom. It basically says, that we should be careful of having closed door classrooms that we don't welcome anyone into. Because then we can't really see how the field is evolving. So, but again, as I say, that's very different from having someone checking you off whether you asked the right amount of questions or given the right amount of feedback. So did you understand where she was going with that? Who was familiar with some of the things she was talking about? Yes, Jay.
About the methods?
Yeah.
So, because I already studied them in my master's, and so I kind of know that they're like the transition from. So started with like classic era, and I don't remember the details, but I kind of know like some general ideas behind all these methods.
Yeah, it kind of also brings me to, I like history also, and it brings me to the different eras, because as Jay said, she talked about the different eras of language learning or teaching, and it makes me think that not only language teaching evolved, but also our society evolved in such a way that maybe that's what caused us as teachers to change our approach.
Good, interesting point. Good. So, we start with things like grammar translation, where I don't care who you are, right? I don't care how you feel or who you are. I just give you a piece of paper, which is from a literary novel or text, or religious text, and say, translate that. And when you translate that, when you can do that successfully, I say, check, you just learned a language, right? To all the way to now, where we say, not only do you need to learn the grammar, do you need to have the language structure inside your head, you also have to want to speak it. You have to feel it. You have to be a person. I have to think about you as a person with your own motivations, with your own fears, with your own anxieties, and how you want to fit into the community. I'm smiling, but it's true. That's now how we think that is, again, how you move from a beginner learner or an intermediate learner to a post-advanced learner who can achieve a lot in their second language. It doesn't matter what method you use, and I keep saying this over and over again, but the admin people don't listen to me. You can use Rosetta Stone, you can use Mango, you can use Babbel, doesn't matter. All of us can get to an early intermediate stage in any language. It's just a question of memorizing some bits and pieces and understanding what normally happens in language, right? If I go to a store, what normally happens to me? What questions do people normally ask me? What information should I normally be able to provide, right? That and a few basic phrases, and a little bit of social language will get you to an early intermediate level. Not difficult to understand. The real interesting issue is how do you go from that intermediate level to the advanced and then the post-advanced level, right? So you guys are at the advanced and post-advanced level, right? You have learned English to a point where you can study a graduate degree in that language. What is it that makes you different from the other people that you studied English with, right? My guess is there aren't that many of you that you studied English with who can do this now. Right? Most of the kids that you studied English with in the schools kind of gave up, right? At the end of school or at the end of college, right? But you kept, and then you look at someone like Dr. Chado, who is essentially at this point a native speaker of English, but who grew up speaking French and Italian and didn't even live in this country till he was 24. 24. If I got that wrong, don't tell me. So what is it that makes that's the really interesting thing. From a TESOL methods and a second language point of view, how do you make that jump? And why is it that so few adults are able to make that jump? So even though I laugh when I say, we should be interested in the whole person and your motivations or whatever, the truth is that there must be individual factors must be super important in this transition. And so what are those individual factors and what makes it possible for some people and not possible for others? Atado's, he's my husband, as I'm sure all of you know at this point, but his parents, for example, his mother and father started to learn English to come out here when he was a grad student. They both watched the same programs. They both looked at the same books. They both did the same amount of practice. They both worked at his sister's youth hostel in Lake Como. So they both practiced with the British people that came in and so on. They came here. His mother was excellent. His father was terrible. So what is that? What sort of drives that, that difference? And as she talked about this idea of the learner as creator or the social turn, that's really what, from an intellectual perspective, that's what we're trying to understand. What part of that contributes to making you a highly successful language learner versus an average language learner. Any other comments or questions? Just distill the family secrets. Yeah.
I just wanted to comment that it's really interesting to see the evolution of TESOL when you compare it to the evolution of psychology in the 20th century, because it very clearly mirrors what psychology was going through and how language was affected by it. Even to the early 2000s when we had the humanist psychology movement, to where now we say the person as a whole needs to be included, which is what psychology is currently.
So cognitive psychology is closely linked, cognitive linguistics, neuro-linguistics, neuropsychology, these things are all, well, of course it makes sense, right? Because it's all happening in here, but we don't know, it's like that black box, right? We don't know how it's interacting in here exactly. Now, I've spent most of my career looking at how intonation works in spoken English, the ways that we use the rise and fall of our voice to indicate different communicative messages. So 3 days ago, it was reported in Wired magazine from Science magazine, the Science journal, that they have found a neuron in the brain that is responsible for recognizing those pitch changes. Okay, so this was super exciting for me because it makes some of the work that I've been doing, where I've been saying that we do have a method. The model that I use says there's a method for us to basically assess a speaker's baseline and then work out, where they are in terms of mid, high, or low pitch. They tell me that this neuron does that. Score! Yeah, so I'm super happy. I will put that article, I need to get the Science article, the original article, to have a look at it, but
does this mean your recently published book now already has a second edition coming?
Yeah. Well, next to my recently published book, when we go to TESOL, will be the article in Science saying, look how trendy and great I am, right? Yeah, so, but it's awesome because it makes these connections that, and I come from TESOL and applied linguistics, comes from a history of saying, well, intonation's all over the place. No one really knows you can't really look at that. You can't really, that changed in the 80s and 90s when we could finally start looking at pitch structures online, because we now have the computer programs that are able to do that, so we could now see where things were systematic. And now, here we go again. The next thing is, we can show that this is happening in the brain, that there's a specific response in the brain to these changes. So that's totally fabulous, and that's sort of where we are, moving through. If you think of something like SLA, it's only really been hanging around since the 1950s or so, in terms of being a real field. So we have a ton to learn. But of course, teaching languages has been around since the classical times, right? Teaching Latin and Greek, when Latin was a lingua franca, right? So, needless to say, we've now got a lot more science to add to the pedagogy. Yeah, which is kind of exciting. Good. All right. So the introduction of the book that you're reading this week introduces, Larson Freeman didn't really talk about this, but what she wants you to do is something called the doubting believing game. And the doubting believing game, which you'll read about it in this chapter if you haven't read it already, where she says, you might look at some of these teaching models and say, yeah, this is totally weird and not for me, right? There's a couple that are truly strange. I don't know if any of you have heard of Desuggestopedia, but in that teaching method, I would reduce the lighting here to pleasant levels. I will put out a few candles. It's so true. I would have some nice Baroque music. I would read you a passage in whatever we were learning. Let's say we were learning Korean as a foreign language. So she would be up here reading a Korean text while you're relaxing, hopefully not falling asleep, but relaxing to there. And this relaxation, this ability to open your mind and reduce tension and anxiety is supposed to help you learn the language, right? It's supposed to help fix the language. And then as part of Desuggestopedia, you all leave here after your happy experience. I send you home and I say, before you go to bed, you read that passage again. And then when you read that passage, then the idea is that while you're asleep, your brain processes that, and so now, to me, that's so much, but whatever. I mean, the idea behind it is that if we can lower anxiety levels, maybe we can increase language learning. So the doubting and believing game is basically her saying, as you look at all these methods, there might be some that you think, score, that sounds totally right. And you might be thinking that, usually from your own experience as a language learner, or from your own experience as a language teacher, there are certain things that we believe, rightly or wrongly, about our own teaching methods and so on. And the doubting game would be, this suggestive peer thing sounds like a whole lot of BS, right? So what she's going to ask you to do is sort of suspend this as we go through some of these methods and say, maybe there is something in some of these methods that we can bring in that help us understand a little bit more about successful language learning. So if you haven't read that chapter, that's what you want to be doing in that chapter.
Yeah, she actually says in there that there is no intention of saying, and I think Brown also says that there's no intention of saying this is good, this is bad, this is the method that you need to take. It's kind of like take the best out of everything that you want and just kind of make it all.
Yeah. Well, and it's because if you have any experience teaching at all, actually of anything, not just language, you realize that you have your own kind of myths and set of practices that you believe to be true. Okay, and it's not a bad idea once in a while to interrogate those myths and practices and see if, you still have something that you could learn. Those of us that haven't taught before, like Diego, you'll come into it as an open book. But some of us who've taught a lot will, need to sort of think, well, there's certain teacher maxims, we call them, like maxims that you believe in, right? Things like you say, for example, I have a language teaching maxim where I say, based on my experience, I don't think calling on people in class to do classroom drills is a good thing. So if you did the direct method, for example, I would say, repeat after me. So let's say we were learning, I don't know, go, went, gone, or whatever I would say. Diego, repeat it. Go, went, gone. Now we repeat it, and I would pick on you, and the more that I would get everybody, and that's considered to be a useful teaching strategy. In my own mind, in my experience, my maxim to myself is, I don't think it works. I think what happens is the anxiety produced in the classroom amongst many learners is such that it's not effective, even if it's effective for some learners. Now, I have no empirical proof of that whatsoever. Okay, that may be true, that may be not true. It's a maxim. It's something that I believe as a personal teacher with under my own experience of 20 years of teaching. Anecdotally, I believe that to be true. So we have a lot of those maxims, right, that we carry inside us that come from various places. And her idea really is just to say, it's not a bad idea to interrogate those every once in a while, you know, and make sure that you understand what underpins that behavior in the first place, and that you are using it in a principled way, and that you, why or why not do you think it's effective? Okay, that's good, yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, so I've put this up here because, now, did you put the, you didn't put the prompt in yet, right? No, so, but you can put it in, right? So, it says the discussion post is set up for you to answer for week 1 with the prompt, which is not true, because I haven't been able to get into my So, Shihoon is my classroom assistant, and he is going to try and do that tonight, okay, and get it in there. But I wanted you to have the prompt, so I'm assuming after tonight or tomorrow I'll be in, so I'll put the prompt up. But that's the prompt that you're going to be responding to for your journal entry discussion. And I would also like you to go to the eCollege site and introduce yourselves to each other, those of you that are online in the different sections. Okay, we are actually going to introduce each other really briefly now here in class, so you can hear some of the people's voices here in class, and then I'm going to ask you to go ahead and do that on the eCollege site. Okay, one other thing before we do that. I want to make a special note to all our students in Katy and the Houston area. I've heard from several of you. Two of our students, Bonnie and Diane, will being evacuated today. I'm so sorry, and we're all sort of with you in spirit and hoping that you're safe. You can contact me or Shelby Miller or Amanda Brown at any time. Please don't be worried that we'll drop you. We're not going to drop you. Stay safe and let us know when you're able to get online and produce the work. But please don't worry that you will be dropped. You won't be, even if you can't get into the site right now. We'll give you plenty of time to catch up with that work. All right. Okay, so what I'm going to ask the in-class people to do now is introduce themselves to each other so we all know who's in our class today. So why don't we start with Nana? Raise your voice, Nana, so also people online can hear you too. I'm afraid they can't see you, but they can hear you. Yeah.
So hi everyone, my name is Nana, and this is my second year in the PhD program at Linguistics. I was looking forward to taking this class because I'm originally an English teacher, and I would like to know more about, especially about the book, which talks about the methods, like how teaching has changed, and what methodologies are doing the doubting and believing the thing. And I'm happy to be here.
And when you were teaching, what method would you say you were using? Do you have an idea, or was it just what your school used?
So the books that we use, they have like a teacher's guide, and they would guide you through like the activities. But after I did my CELTA, we were all like taught to have a student-centered classroom. So less teacher talk and more students involvement. So no particular specific model, just like whatever motivates the students to take initiative in the class and use the target language.
Okay, good. That's a good point. Does anyone know roughly what research suggests is teacher-student talking time in the classroom currently? In a language classroom, you've done this with me before.
Addington.
Huh?
Addington.
Uh,
I read an article.
There's several articles, but what's the number that they suggest, and what's the number it should be? Does anyone know those?
Dang it.
So the number they suggest is happening right now is 70-30. Teachers are talking 70% of the time, and learners are talking 30% of the time. And what should it be?
The other way around.
Totally the other way around. Yeah. Teachers should be talking 30% of the time, and students should be talking 70% of the time. Yeah. So that's exactly where that notion comes from. Also, Nana mentioned CELTA. CELTA is the British certificate.
Falls under IH.
Yes, that falls under IH, indeed. Well, don't tell them I said anything bad about International House. Yeah, right. Yeah, I did that too back in the day.
Hello everyone, my name is Juan Pablo, but anybody say Juan Pablo. Usually only my father call me Juan Pablo when he's angry. Say Juan Pablo, come here right now or something like that. Everybody call me Juanpa.
Juanpa.
Juanpa. Short. I'm a Spanish instructor here at Texas A&M. I came to United States 2 years ago for finishing my PhD, but first I enrolled in MA in Spanish. I already finished the MA in Spanish. I'm starting this MA in applied linguistics because I feel I'm not ready to start a PhD in English, and I need to learn more about it.
Got it. Great. And you're teaching Spanish. Do you know what method you use in Spanish?
Communicative and task-based.
Task-based and communicative. Good. Both of which will come up in Larson Freeman's book, yeah? So you can see how principled your book is in its approach, yeah? Good. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Noemi. I'm also a Spanish instructor here in Texas A&M University of Commerce. I almost done with my MA in Spanish. I joined to the teacher master because I quit my career because I'm a journalist. I'm trying to turn elementary teacher. It's quite difficult in my country because of the law and so on. So this is my opportunity to do something like that. So when we are done with the master, I can do the teaching certification. So about the methodology is the same, it's the communicative method, but we are turning to the project method. So it's mainly the class is like projects and we mix with the communicative method.
Okay, good. Thanks, Ren.
Hello, my name is Diego. I am primarily interested in second language and third language acquisition. My background is in psychology as of now. And yeah.
We'll turn you yet. This is Diego's third class
Third.
class with us. So I think we might be on the turn. We might be on the turn from psychology.
Might as well stay.
Yeah, there you go. Nice to see you again, Diego.
Do you speak a second language?
I speak Spanish and a little French.
So I'm Shelby Miller, and I tend to be the only monolingual student in the classrooms I'm in. So everyone else can speak another language but me. So this is let's see here. I'll take 2 classes this spring, and then two this fall, including this class, and then 2 in the spring, and then I'll be done with my coursework for the PhD. So I feel like I have a leg up in this class because I started taking it last year and then got really busy with recruitment, so I ended up withdrawing. So I feel excited that I think I probably got the first student homework.
You've actually recruited most of the people that are out there that are in this
so-
class.
So I wasn't lying, I'm in the
Thank you,
class with
Shelby.
you.
Yeah,
I told them
I'm
I was like, I'm taking the class with you. So if anybody has any questions about things outside of the classroom, you're more than welcome to connect with me, because I'm in this with you. But yeah, that's about it. I look forward to finishing the class this fall.
Right.
And I am the result of that recruitment that she did.
There you go. You see? There you go. That's fabulous.
So my name is Sandy. I am from Mexico, and I'm doing a PhD in English. This is my first semester here, and I am very glad to be here. I am taking General Linguistics and then Business TESOL. I have actually taken this class on the lower level, and I've also taught this class on lower levels. But I'm really excited about having it on a graduate level because, it's a different approach. And there's a lot that we can learn based on some of the years of experience that I've had. I've taught English for 10 years, including my student teaching. And at the beginning, I don't know what method I was using because I was just a student teacher, but
Sure.
I can say that I was required, when we were instructed into it, to do the communicative approach.
Yeah.
Because we were using Cambridge University Press, and it's mainly communicative approach on an EFL.
Good. And it's interesting when we start talking about the communicative approach and the sort of principles underlying it, how much, you realize that you really were teaching that approach or you really weren't necessarily teaching that. It's really fascinating because the textbooks themselves are seriously watered down versions of any approach, actually apart from the crash and base textbooks, which are essentially his and Terrell's. But so, for example, one of the things I'm very interested in is international varieties of spoken English. So Indian English, African English, and so on, as are a number of my colleagues. And one of them is a pronunciation specialist, Linda Grant, who's been writing pronunciation books for years. And in her last book, she wanted to include all these international samples of international English, Spanish speakers, Italian speakers, so on and so on. And the press would not allow her to do that. They said that it would be difficult to sell the textbook in places like China and so on, where they just wanted to hear Americans. They didn't want to hear. So, that's just one small example of how the textbook industry doesn't necessarily reflect the sort of theoretical paradigms of teaching and applied linguistics that we're trying to push forward, So it's always interesting to look at the approach that they say they're doing and then look at the textbook and see where the gaps are.
And then you have this struggle between you as a teacher and your boss as language coordinator wanting to
Right.
the university press wanting to sell, and it's just
And that's really, and of course, everybody that's out there that's teaching K through 12, they have this text thing that it's text now, TEKS, right? That they have to follow. So, it's complicated, but in my experience, the more you know about what you're doing, the more principled you can be, in your approaches. Good.
Okay, I'm Carmen Soriano. I'm actually an alumni of the university. So I have taken Dr. Pickering before in my undergraduate degree, because I actually have a bachelor's degree in bilingual education. And I took a form, I want to say, is this class kind of like a graduate form of the class I took with you?
Yeah.
So,
457?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I took the undergraduate form of this class with her, and I really liked it, and I found it interesting. And actually taking that class with you is what kind of made me want to coming to this degree.
Oh.
So I'm very excited to be back with Dr. Pickering face to face because I did take her over the summer.
That's right.
So this will be technically my third class, but I kind of withdrew from my second class over the summer because it was very intensive at the time.
Was that the 5-week?
Yes.
Yeah.
Everyone agreed.
I know, I'm so sorry, and if anyone out there is also still suffering the trauma, you know, I do want you to know that we realise that was a huge mistake, and we will not be doing that again. Our summer classes will be 10 weeks instead of 5 weeks, because it was just, I mean, not just for the students, but also for us as faculty, it nearly killed me and Sal. So, yeah, we won't be doing that again. We'll be doing the longer summer. I don't know if we told you that yet, Shelby.
I heard, I was just, yeah.
Yeah, I think
that's easier on any course, really. Just
yeah, I mean, I know it seems nice to get it all done in 5 weeks, but Jacob's like, no, on no level did that seem nice to me. But it seems like a nice idea, but then you do it and it's like pretty hellacious. Yeah. It was pretty rough, right?
And for the record, if we do that model, you can still get financial aid if it's a 10-week course, so.
Excellent.
Another
For the record,
Yeah,
says Shelby, you can still get financial aid. That's awesome. Thank you for coming back in. I'll talk to you after this because I'm going to stay put. Jay?
I'm Jay, and this is still my first year in PhD program. And so far, I really like it. It was so exciting. And also, I'm a survivor of the pragmatic class, like, you know.
You too?
Yes, yeah. And yeah, it was pretty intense, but like I learned a lot. And I've been teaching English like for 10, 11 years in my country. And like Cindy, I started as a student teacher, so kind of like had no clue what kind of method like I was following. And but the time that I was doing my master's, I was teaching, and I used a collective method, a combination of mostly communicative method and what's that? Task-based, sorry.
Task-based.
Yeah, task-based. And my class were like mostly student-centered, and so that was for me, yes. I did the 30% of talking, and I involved my students a lot because for me, the affective filter and all these things, the intrinsic motivations of the student, how they feel that they're doing things, they're experiencing language themselves was really important.
Yeah, right. So, and that'll be interesting for you to have a look at, to sort of see what the evidence is for various maxims that you've created for yourself. You know, I believe this, and then to compare that to what we look at in terms of study. So good. Jay? Yeah, you just have to say you're the classroom.
Everybody knows you.
Hi, my name is Yoon Lee. I'm a classroom teaching assistant for Dr. Carden Hatfield's Pickering. And this is my last semester of my master's degree. Yeah, I'm done.
He's happy and you're sad.
Well, we don't want to let him go, but I guess we have. We do have tons of. So for everybody out there who's still watching, Shihan is someone who can also help you out if you're having trouble. If you're having trouble with my Leo, Shihan can't help you with that because he can't help me, and etc. But if you're having trouble seeing something, or you're not sure where something is, if you go into DocShare and you think, I thought she said that what is T-cell was going to be in DocShare and it isn't in DocShare, you can either, or you can't find it, or whatever, you can either contact me or you can contact Shihan, because he has access to all of that and helps me upload that stuff, particularly at the moment when I can't get it. And he is SLE 37? 67. You're Leo now.
As Lee. Oh, I forgot.
Awesome. We'll find that out. Yeah.
37. As Lee 37.
37. Good. SLE 37 at leomountamo.edu. Yeah. Good.
I am Sarbanos. I'm a PhD of English student, and my focus is linguistics. And I'm planning to narrow down my studies to computational linguistics, and I am interested in applied linguistics, both teaching and also I think computational linguistics is another field for applied linguistics, because it is also applied linguistics. But the reason why I chose this class, because I'm really interested in the social and psychological processes that are involved in teaching. I'd like to learn about it. Yeah.
Okay, good. So that was Diane Larson Freeman's The Social Turn, the one that is sort of one of the most recent. Good. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody out there. We are done for today, and we'll see you next week. You are done.